We are beginning Chapter 3 of The Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn. Unquestioned Beliefs. The soldiers were forced to question beliefs they had never questioned. Their certainty was undermined. In The Social Animal, psychologist Elliot Aronson remarks, "Often beliefs that we hold are never called into question. When they are not, it is relatively easy for us to lose sight of why we hold them. Thus, if subjected to severe attack, such beliefs may crumble." Many of the commentators on Korea pointed out that when a soldier was uncertain of his beliefs or uninformed of his facts, he was far more susceptible to influence. Robert Blake and John Mouton, who made a study of interpersonal influence which was published in The Manipulation of Human Behavior, found from their own experiments that conversion and conformity occurred most often when people were expressing ideological attitudes that were not based in personal experience. They suggested that an individual, to resist interrogation, must be well informed of the relevant and necessary facts and their implications. As mentioned in the previous chapter, many American soldiers were confused about the validity or otherwise of claims that the United States had been engaging in bacteriological warfare. Mirlou has also said that soldiers needed self-confidence and the ability to think for themselves if they were to have the courage to reject emotionally pleasant reasoning that in fact lacked truth. It has therefore been seen quite clearly that lack of information and not knowing why one holds certain beliefs can leave an individual on shifting ground. But there is a difference between the concepts information and knowledge. Investigating the facts brings information, whereas knowing why one holds a belief does not necessarily bring knowledge. A belief is a belief because it isn't knowledge. Unfortunately, every individual's upbringing helps to invest him with a set of beliefs which, adopted when too young to be questioned, often come to masquerade as knowledge. According to Hans Tak, the eloquent and insightful author of The Social Psychology of Social Movements, the combined effect of childhood indoctrination and the socialization process at its most successful and effective level serves to blinker an individual to reality and create a dependence on a belief system, any belief system. He can take blacks or whites, but not the shifting shades in between. Indoctrination is an emotive word. Perhaps for most people, it is most commonly associated with the rather blatant process of persuasion that goes on in totalitarian regimes or the systematized thinking encouraged in minority political groups or religious cults that other people belong to, where slogans or catchwords such as state control or enlightenment encapsulate central concepts. It has a bad flavor, a bad feel, implying that the indoctrinated person has taken on board the conclusions of others instead of coming to his or her own. It flies in the face of free thinking, the rational weighing up of arguments and all such ideals that we think we hold dear. But indoctrination, defined at its simplest, means to imbue with a doctrine. To imbue means to permeate or to saturate, implying a process that can be much more subtle than the repetitious reciting of approved slogans. As authors who have been concerned by the concepts of coercion and behavior manipulation show, most of us are indoctrinated throughout our lives, often without even knowing it. Beliefs almost grow into us. They are then sustained and protected, usually unconsciously, by the physiological and psychological processes of perception. Hans Tak demonstrates with particular lucidity how indoctrination takes place in childhood, whether it is intended or not. He sees a child's vulnerability as fourfold. First and foremost, a young child has limited perceptions. The world in the world is his world, and his world is largely composed of his mother and father. As Tock says, in a world looked at through this particular lens, the most casual remarks of parents can easily acquire the weight of infallibility. Secondly, a child is vulnerable because of his dependence. Very early on he will learn or sense that his needs are more likely to be met if he conforms to what is expected of him. If a child says something that fits with his parents' particular perspective, perhaps regarding the race or religion of the neighbors, he is likely to receive praise or approval that reinforces the rightness of the view. Humanistic psychologists believe that such conformity to the wishes of parents in return for love, affection, and approval is the cause of much identity confusion later on. Carl Rogers, one of the founders of the humanistic movement, advocated the fostering of unconditional positive regard, that is, that a person should be made to feel valued for himself regardless of what he does. Too many children growing up thinking that only if they suppress all their anger or weakness or become academic athletes will they warrant and receive love and affection. Intellectual awareness of the process as adults is often not enough in itself to overcome such deeply held childhood beliefs. Thirdly, Tock stresses the restricted nature of a child's sources of information. As he points out, adults finding themselves in situations such as in POW camps in Korea, where they cannot validate information, are more likely to succumb to propaganda and indoctrination than otherwise. How then can a child be protected from the effects of continued exposure to the views and behavior of perhaps just two individuals whom he idolizes to begin with? Finally, the process dubbed identification by the psychoanalysts plays its part in the insidious indoctrination process. The young child feels a need to model himself on his father or mother in order to find his own identity. To find clues as to how he should behave in the world, he picks up on the ways that his parents behave, particularly toward him. He will note their reactions, their interreactions, and unwittingly imbibe their beliefs. A nod, an expression of interest, a puckered lip, are all important pieces in a child's jigsaw. They cue him in to what is done and what isn't done, what is thought and what isn't thought. The parents are probably quite unaware that it is happening. Skeptics might say that such parental power is relatively short-lasting. By the time the child is going to school, he or she is exposed to many different viewpoints and lifestyles and is all too keen to ask questions. Tock acknowledges that and has an answer. Early indoctrination, he says, would be ineffectual if it were subsequently neutralized. Neutralization, however, is rare because our society is constructed so as to provide each person with consecutive waves of relatively like-minded associates. The part of a town a child lives in, wealthy or poor, will dictate the school he goes to and the kind of children he meets there. The kind of school he goes to will dictate the academic progress he is likely to achieve and the further training he will take. All along the path he is likely to meet more like-minded than unlike-minded people, all of whom will help to reinforce his unconsciously formed first worldview. And that was chapter 3 of The Manipulated Mind, and we will pick up in the next video with part 2 of this chapter. See you there.